No, no, no. This is not what we wanted. This is the exact opposite. Everything that we've been asking for from this football team has reverted back to day one material. Awful to see this Eagles team now regress. You can look at it and think glass half full, that it was a division opponent, that it was a game in which they were destined to just suffer a setback, that it was just a matter of time before they had one loss, bad loss, in a stretch of good games, and they have the Jets next week. Great. But it's not the what that gets me. It's not. It's not the what in which they lost that game. We know that this year is about growth. We know this year is about finding out who you are, searching to see who your identity is. And I think we thought they found a secret to success. Instead, what they found was something they could do, they could sustain. But at some point, at some juncture in a game, it's going to be forced that their hand is going to turn and have to throw the football. As much as we love running the ball, as great as it is, once again, they ran the ball against the Giants. But my goodness, this team on Sunday against the Giants looked so bad on offense, first and foremost. And Jalen Hurts, we have to rip. As much as we've supported him, this is not a game that decided his future. So we can take kids' gloves off here and still approach Jalen like a starting quarterback and be upset and be disappointed and be frustrated and be pissed off that some of these throws were reprehensible at best. Now, the flip side is drops, and I know the other Jalen is going to be a focus of a lot of people's attention. That's fine. The other drops coming as a result of great throws. So even in a game, and let's provide some necessary balance here with Jalen Hurts. We'll hit our three keys, Jimmy Kempski, the fellas, Matt and Evan from Philly Voice, everybody. We'll get you a full comprehensive breakdown of all the things that went right and wrong. But let's just take a second here, okay? Let's take a second and talk about what happened with Jalen Hurts, because it's not one way or the other. There's no phone calls here. I don't need to solicit anything from you, although a thumbs up and a subscribe would be nice. Jalen Hurts was awful, more often than not, throwing the football. It's not often that we see this, but against the Giants, it was brutal. Some of those interceptions were just so unforgivable, and then a couple that bounced off defenders' hands. McKinney had one at the end that should have been a pick as well. So if you really want to tally this as far as true picks, he's probably at 4.5 to 5 picks, which, again, is disgusting to see. This is also an individual who comes off running for 3 touchdowns the previous week and was still good enough on the ground to help an offense when it was all said and done. He was still good enough at the end to make a couple of key throws that could have won a football game. As bad as he was, and notice I said as bad as he was. I'm not saying, oh, well, don't worry about those or those don't matter. The interceptions matter. This should have been a 24-28-10 football game without a doubt. And the Giants are just so bad they couldn't do anything at all with the gift that the Philadelphia Eagles gave them. Nick Sirianni and company gave them. It was bad watching this, truly bad watching this. And they deserve all of the criticism for falling back into bad habits, for rushing passes, for not making the correct read, for not having enough zip on the ball, for just making bad decisions with the football, fumbles, inopportune time. It didn't add up. Bad holding calls. You're never going to win like that. We know you're not going to win like that. We've been telling teams for years they need to get their act together because it was so sloppy. And it was so just detrimental. Self-inflicting wounds, unforced errors, whatever you want to lay it out there. The Philadelphia Eagles were garbage against the New York Giants. Absolute garbage. And yeah, the defense only kept them to 13 points, but come on. The Giants still were able to move the football. They were still able to collectively run the football. They're just so bad they couldn't do a damn thing with it. Now, I'll tell you what really pisses me off more so than anything else outside of them losing this game and them losing this football game, the way and the nature and the manner in which it happened, which is just terrible, and they deserve it. Pile on this Monday. Remember that feeling you had earlier in the season where this team was going absolutely nowhere. They needed a gut check like this. They needed a reminder like this. Now they have a get-right opportunity. We'll talk about the Jets before we get out of here, but this game, man, they came in smelling their own crap. You know that. They came in buying the hype. They came in buying it all. Oh, yeah, we got a chance at the playoffs. Listening to the radio, watching the TV. Oh, yeah, playoffs came in. And then you get smacked down to reality because it's the NFL. And there are professionals on the other side. And you're not always going to beat a team 44-6. At some point, a team's going to smack back and say, all right, well, let's see what you got. All this talk about the run. Let's see what you got. Why don't you throw the football? Right again. Jalen Hurts, 31 attempts. Unnecessary. Totally unnecessary. This entire game was unnecessary. The way in which it played out, totally unnecessary. Eagles let themselves down before they even got there. They had it in their head that they won the game. They showed up, thought, all right, we'll just show up. We'll do what we need to do. We got this thing locked in. And they looked awful. And I'll tell you, what bothers me the most is looking at target shares, is looking at how this game played out at the end. Nick Sirianni having guys out there who were brand new to the game, and Kenny Gainwell at the end, Jalen Reagor, unnecessary to go to him when DeVonta Smith is on the field. Sorry, DeVonta Smith deserves 70% of the target share each and every game. And the fact that Jalen Reagor had more targets than both DeVonta Smith and Dallas Goedert is inexcusable to me. Totally inexcusable to me. And that's going to be something I'll harp on throughout. It's something that doesn't make any sense. DeVonta Smith, no targets on the final two drives. What in the world is going on? You can't start outthinking opponents by putting different pieces out there who haven't played. You're going to wind up hurting yourself. Greg Ward, Kenny Gainwell, these guys just randomly thrown in the game and asked to do big things. Once you saw Jalen Reagor not have it, that's it. You move away. My goodness. As bad as Jalen Hurts was, still a couple of key throws, drops. You have to balance that out. You can't ignore it. When you say, oh, well, you can't throw the football, he's inaccurate, and all those interceptions. Okay. That's fair and a valid point. All those interceptions, not good. But you cannot ignore the fact that Jalen Hurts also made some key throws that were simply dropped. And those key throws, including one at the end, might have even won the football game. So it's a really difficult scenario to play out. One thing that's simple is target shares. One thing that's coaching that's easy to fix that should never happen again is Jalen Reagor should never be the most targeted player in a game. Should never happen. The only way that happens is if multiple guys in front go down. That's it. The only circumstance. Other than that, you never have a chance, ever. And that's going to kill you. That's going to ruin your day, and that's going to ruin your game, and that's going to kill your game plan. And you're going to look around asking, what the hell happened? Well, you didn't target DeVonta Smith at all on the final two drives. That's in a game that you should never have been down in the first place in a game that you should have blown that opponent out. You don't even target your best receiver. And that's partly on Jalen Hurts, too. Don't get me wrong. You got to take some chances, kid. And you can't rely on this head coach. All right, we need to figure out exactly what went wrong here. Let's go to an expert. That's Jimmy Kempski, of course, on Twitter at Jimmy Kempski, everywhere here on Philly Voice for your Philadelphia Eagles and beyond coverage. Jimmy, as always, appreciate the time when we could get it here following an Eagles game. In this case, it wasn't pretty. How bad was it really on Sunday, and how bad do you think things are moving forward?
Is bad. I mean, that Giants team is complete trash. I mean, that is the Lions aside, that is the worst team that they've played so far this year. I mean, and not only bad, but they're also very banged up. They're missing, both starting safeties. They're missing their Mike linebacker and Blake Martinez. they're missing a bunch of guys on offense. Saquon Barkley isn't anywhere near the player that, he was earlier in his career. I mean, for them to go out and lay the egg they did is highly disappointing given the way that their last 4 games had gone. Like they played, well against the Lions, of course. They were close against the Chargers, and then their 2 wins over the Broncos and Saints were impressive. They looked like they had some momentum heading into the stretch run, the back end of this season. And for them to play the way they did, particularly on offense, obviously, I think their defense did a good job keeping them in it. But this was, Jalen Hurts' worst game as a professional quarterback. And then obviously the heat that Jalen Reagor is going to get until he does something positive is just going to be overwhelming for that kid, potentially, dropping not just 1, but 2 potential, game-winning touchdown passes. I mean, and Philadelphia obviously has a history of seeing those kinds of, monumental drops in big moments, like Riley Cooper against the Saints in the playoffs, like Nelson Aguilar against the Falcons a couple of years back, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside against the Lions a couple of years back. But he had 2 in the span of 4 plays. And, they just had an opportunity to win this game, even with how badly they played, and they still couldn't get it done.
So that's where I think I'm wrestling with the takeaway, which is they can play as poorly as they did against such a bad team of the Giants and still, for whatever reason, have a chance not only to stay in that game, but actually win the game. Or, wow, what happened to the last 4 weeks of momentum and energy and identity against a team as bad as the Giants? But, we see this a lot, right, Jimmy, in the league, where a young team gets some sense of success. They start smelling themselves. They maybe are listening and reading and hearing all the great things that are being said. Do you think it was just them getting caught up in the hype and kind of believing what was being around them? Or do you think that this is maybe a little deeper and maybe a little bit more fundamental of an issue?
Yeah, it's hard for me to say whether they were sort of smelling themselves a little bit or why they came out as flat as they did in this game. I thought if they had sort of stuck to the formula that had been working so well over the last 4 games, which was a run-heavy approach. And ultimately, they did run for over 200 yards in this game. So The run was super effective against this Giants team that has struggled stopping the run all season. And, they ran the ball really well. But still, for whatever reason, Jalen Hurts dropped back and threw 31 pass attempts. And, it just wasn't working it was clear, he just wasn't having a good day. And it was clear from my perspective anyway, that they should have just ran the ball down the Giants' throats all day because they couldn't stop it. So I don't know if it was really so much that, they were sort of, overconfident coming into this game. I just thought they played a stupid game and they didn't execute when opportunities presented themselves.
Real quick, let me follow up on that. Why do you think they abandoned and didn't stay with it? They were never down even more than a full touchdown.
I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. I couldn't tell you, but the offensive line was absolutely dominating them up front. It was clear.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, there was a pretty big stretch, not a big stretch, but there was a stretch in the middle of the game where they did sort of get away from the run and they were passing. Again, he threw 31 pass attempts on a day where he just clearly didn't have it. And they were running the ball at will. I don't know why they got away from it, but especially with the success that they've had over the last 4 games. I don't know. It didn't make sense to me earlier in the season as well, and it certainly didn't make sense in this game either.
So the one thing that I think makes it even worse, compounds the frustrations of watching Jalen Hurts drop back 31 times. And again, as you mentioned, a game that they should be super run heavy and even more effective than they already were, is how limited the target share was for both DeVonta Smith and also Dallas Goedert.
Right.
And I think that really... And look, it's easy to pinpoint the coaching, the game plan, and also I think Hurts deserves some blame there as well. But you're watching the game up close. Is it simply neglect, or were the Giants maybe doing something special that Nick Sirianni and the coaching staff just couldn't adjust? Because we should never be in a scenario, right, where Jalen Reagor is the leading target guy in any game.
Yeah, I wondered that too. And I actually asked Nick Sirianni after the game if the Giants had done anything special to take away Devonte Smith and Dallas Goedert. Jalen Hurts was actually asked the same question in his post-game press conference, and they both said no. The Giants basically just ran their defense like they normally did. They had James Bradbury on DeVonta Smith quite a bit. And Nick Sirianni actually said that they kind of actually like some aspects of that matchup in the Eagles' favor. So, no, I don't think the Giants really did anything, to go out of their way to limit those guys. But for Dallas Goedert to only get 3 targets, he had 1 catch for no yards. And for DeVonta Smith to only have 4 targets, I believe he had 2 catches for, I want to say, I don't remember exactly. Doesn't matter.
Not much.
But
right.
Jalen Reagor had 7 on his own. He had as many targets as those 2 guys combined, which just don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, Quez Watkins, I think, had 5 targets. Kenny Gainwell had 4 targets. Like, come on, what are we doing? Like, you got to find a way to get the ball into DeVonta Smith's hands. And as you said, it's not just Nick Sirianni. I think, I personally would probably put it a little bit more on, on Jalen Hurts, because there were times where DeVonta Smith was running open, and for whatever reason, the ball just didn't go his way. So, I've been kind of saying for a while now, you got to find a way to get DeVonta Smith somewhere in the ballpark of like 10 targets per game. I think he's that good. And not only that good, but he's so much better than any other of the receivers on the team that it just doesn't make sense to try to force feed him, especially when he's done such a good job not only getting open, but also making contested catches for as slight of a receiver as he is. So, yeah, I mean, there's really no good excuse for him only getting 4 targets and for Goddard to only get 3 when guys like Reagor are getting 7 targets despite proving his ineffectiveness.
Yeah, it's a great point at the end about him proving the ineffectiveness. And also it's refreshing to hear you mention how, Devontae should be looking at double-digit targets per game. Last one for you, Jimmy. Appreciate it, as always. Let's talk about injury, because moving forward, this is going to be the real derailment of any attack for that last wild card spot, depending on what happens with the Cowboys, I get, in this division. But really, Jason Kelsey, I think, was the biggest concern. What else beyond how bad is it with Kelsey, and what else are we looking at beyond him?
Yeah, I don't know anything more than the public at this point. But Jason Kelsey did, leave that game for like 30-something snaps, I believe. He came back. It was a knee issue. Nick Sirianni didn't even know what Miles Sanders' injury was. He knew it was his lower body, whether it was his foot or his ankle. But that's why he was out during a big stretch. Actually, he didn't return, I don't believe, after he got hurt. So we'll see what his status is going forward. And then Jack Driscoll got carted off. If they lose him, I think that's fairly significant, because you're already down Isaac Seumalo, you're already down Brandon Brooks. You're now down a third guard, and that means that Nate Herbig is going to be your starter going forward, likely at right guard. He really struggled yesterday. A couple bad penalties, one wiped out a Boston Scott touchdown. So yeah, I mean those 3 injuries I think are worth monitoring as the week goes on. And Nick Sirianni will be asked about that shortly when he speaks on Monday during his day after press conference, and then as the week unfolds, if he doesn't have adequate answers initially.
Awesome, Jimmy. We'll pay attention to everything you have this week leading up to that Jets game, and then also reacting, as you mentioned, to that Giants loss. Thank you, sir.
All righty, Tom. Appreciate it.
Big keys here for the game. Let's start with the quarterback. He was awful. And I think it's necessary to talk about how bad Jalen Hurts was, and also the fact that they had a chance to slide in and actually win that game. I'll say this. It's easy to pick on the interceptions. It's easy to point out the drops. What I will focus on here, though, is decision-making, not from an interception or drop standpoint, but from the final 2 drive standpoint. And I don't care if DeVonta Smith is blanketed, which he wasn't, to be fair. But you have to find a way. If you are Jalen Hurts, you have to find a way to make sure that that DeVonta Smith gets the football. You have to. You can't be in a situation where you go the final 2 drives that could be game-winning drives, and DeVonta Smith is not targeted at all. That cannot happen. That's inexcusable. And yes, Nick Sirianni, the coaching staff, the offense as a whole, everybody deserves blame. And Jalen Hurts is going to get crushed. I get it, all week, and rightfully so. Those interceptions were bad. In fact, we talked about this in the open. Probably should have had upwards to 5 interceptions on the day. Realistically, 5 interceptions. However, the one thing that won't be discussed enough, and this is a huge key for me, not finding a way to work DeVonta Smith in the final 2 drives. not finding a way to work your best friend out there, your best receiver, the reason why you'll have a shot at winning that game or even winning that game. You see the difference? Jalen Reagor gave you a shot at winning that game. Devonte Smith wins that game. And they neglected this young man who has proven more so than any new or young player on this team that he belongs in the NFL at his position. Proven it. And yet, nothing. Zero. Zilch for Smith. That's terrible. Should never have happened. Number two, the defense. Defense played well enough. Defense deserves credit. They played well enough to win this football game. The defense held a really bad Giants offense to 13 points. I don't know what to make of this moving forward. And feel free to leave a comment. Make sure you subscribe, of course. Hit that thumbs up button. Let us know which one you look at here, which side you take. Was it truly a defensive masterpiece, if you will, where Jonathan Gannon and company came in and suffocated that Giants offense? Daniel Jones got some numbers. New York Giants run offense got some numbers, but ultimately, this was a game in which the Giants weren't able to do anything because of the game plan the Eagles implemented and executed, because of what the Eagles did on defense, because, mind you, of everything, the strategy that we saw implemented by this Eagles team, not the opposite. And this is where I wrestle and struggle. The Giants are just bad. The Giants are just a bad football team, and they make mistakes. And it's not just turnovers. They just make bad decisions. And Freddie Kitchens coming in, that offense looked a little better than with Jason Garrett there. But for the most part, they just don't have a lot of talent. And the quarterback's decent at best. Saquon Barkley is not what we've seen flashes of him. And they're down a bunch of receivers. Kenny Golladay is a good receiver, but he's easy to take out of a game. I think there's a difference. You can be a good receiver, but also easy to take out of a game. Not nice by any means to see a Giants offense like that. If you're a fan of that team, squander opportunities. But at the same time, you have to ask yourself, what was it? Was it the Giants defense? Was it the Giants offense? Was it just this Giants team being good, bad in certain spots, allowing that team to win? Or was it the fact that the Giants offense couldn't do anything against really good Eagles defense? I think it's a little of both, don't get me wrong, and I'm sure there'll be a comment or two saying that. But if you had to shade a certain side, I think, unfortunately for me, it's going to be more the fact that it's the Giants defense or offense is just not good. Giants defense isn't great either, don't get me wrong. And that's another reason why you're frustrated with this Eagles offense. But no, I think it's more a matter of the Giants defense. Just not great. And that's a problem moving forward for the Eagles if they can't figure that out. All right, a last key here. What do you do next week? This was as forgettable of a football game as you'll see. How do you bounce back? What adjustments are you making? What are you doing to specifically ensure that the game is not in the hands of guys like Jalen Reagor, Kenny Gainwell, things along those lines? And it opens up, I think, this conversation about just who Jalen Reagor is right now on this football team. What is his role on this team moving forward? You have capital invested in him, clearly. This is a man who was taken in the first round and was looked at by the organization as somebody who can be an impact player moving forward. He is not. He is not right now. He's not an impact player when it comes to the wide receiver position. He's not an impact player when it comes to returning kicks, punts. So what are you doing right now with that? What are you doing with this position? Honestly, you've got Quez Watkins who can play, who has a unique ability with his height and speed to get downfield and cause some havoc. Poor man's Van Jefferson at this point could probably grow into a better version of that, but that's kind of who he is right now. Third, fourth wide receiver on a team that also has a tight end. and a running back or two you'd think that they'd throw to. So not even guaranteed typical number 3 wide receiver looks, but just somebody that you are okay having on your team and definitely okay having on your field stretching teams' defenses. Fine. The other guy's DeVonte Smith. We already talked about him. It's a crime that DeVonte doesn't own 70% of the target share each and every week. Outside of those two guys, who are you moving forward with? Greg Ward, the experiment's over. You don't really have much else. So at this point, Jalen Reagor is in there out of circumstance, out of desperation, more so than anything else. But if we talk about this season as fact-finding, as we talk about this soul-searching season as trying to figure out who you are as an identity of a team and who stays and who goes and what are you doing with Jalen Reagor? We've got another situation like Nelson Aguilar on our hands where it may not be drop heavy, but it's just disappearance heavy. It's a guy that's just not involved in this game plan, and he's taking away targets. He's taking away looks from guys that can impact the game. And that should never happen. And I think at this point, people are right where it's not just Jalen Reagor, but I think he represents a total overhaul at the wide receiver position, keeping Devonte Smith and Quez Watkins. And that's it. And you have to be okay with that moving forward if you're building around Jalen Hurts or any other quarterback for that matter. We welcome back Matt and Evan, the most anticipated part each week of post-flight here on Philly Voice. And we finally have something to go back and forth. It seems like it's been smooth sailing for the most part 3 of the last 4 weeks. The Philadelphia Eagles grounded, to say the least, here against the New York Giants. It was ugly, often, a lot of turnovers, a lot of mistakes, a lot of penalties, just bad. So normally we have some easy jump-offs to start with the positives. Let's just look at the obvious, and that's Jalen Hurts, and then that'll kind of open up conversation. So, Matt, Evan, you guys want to start? Matt, just about Jalen Hurts, the fact that they still were in this football game, but really one of the worst, ugliest games we've seen from him since he came here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it wasn't pretty. I think, the fact that they were still in it is more to do with, the defense didn't play great. They didn't have to, but 13 points, it kept them in the game. And I think that's more the reason they were in the game late than anything. But with Hurts, I mean, it just was another reminder of why, we're not sure yet that he's the guy. I mean, he just can't make certain throws, or at least can't do it consistently, because we have seen him make some tough throws here and there. He just doesn't do it at a consistent enough basis for you to feel comfortable with him throwing the amount of times you need to throw to win in the NFL. For all the good they've been doing, running the ball, there are times where you're going to have to throw the ball. And they just didn't get that done today.
Yeah, what struck me was the number of clean pockets that he had. He had like a very decent amount of time to throw. I don't know. I mean, obviously Hurts made some bad decisions, but are we giving the receivers a pass? Even DeVonta wasn't targeted that much. These receivers aren't getting any separation, and he's kind of being hung out there to dry to make plays all by himself. Other than, Smith, there's trash out there. We saw, the 2 passes that Reagor dropped. Greg Ward had some key snaps and targets. Goddard, I guess, wasn't able to get open. The rest of their tight ends are crap. I mean, the weapons around them were terrible. And the recipe, I guess, to beat the Eagles is to make Hurts throw to people from the pocket. And the Giants were kind of able to do that. And I guess, I don't know what the solution is. I'm not a football expert. We didn't see a lot of screens or quick slants. That's something that maybe they need to work on so that they can kind of, avoid the situation where he's sitting in the pocket, not having any options. But that really did him in today.
Yeah, I think what frustrates me the most, to your point, Evan, is you're in a situation where you've invested a first-round pick, rightfully so, in Devonte Smith. At the same time, you've invested a lot of money in an extension for Dallas Goedert. These guys should not equal the total targets of Jalen Reagor in any football game, in any scenario. It just should never happen like that. Those guys should be force-fed the ball until it just becomes impossible to get anything from it. And they've already committed. They've committed a ton to Goddard. They've committed a ton to Smith at that position. And you're right, as far as at the wide receiver spot, there's a big gap in talent between Smith and everybody else. So it's on the coaching staff first and foremost, I guess, right, to get something going and creatively work these guys in. But I can't accept a reality where Devonte Smith is so heavily under targeted and just has such a light share of the target share in a game. Just it sucks and it just doesn't compute.
Yeah, I'll have to. I mean, we'll have to go back and watch and see what they were doing to him. Maybe they were taking him out a lot, but there were a few plays where I thought he was open and they just didn't go his way. You got to get that guy the ball.
And by the way, I mean, not to go way too deep on this, but Howie Roseman was comfortable fielding a roster that had no wide receivers with more than, I guess, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is the veteran of the group. He didn't feel the need to bring anybody in. He didn't want to trade for a veteran. There were guys out there. So, I mean, we're acting surprised that they're struggling to complete passes to wide receivers who are not getting separation. But what did we expect when we have pretty much washed up draft picks that are playing underneath their value? And there's really, I mean, it's ugly out there. And how could we be surprised,
Well, I also think, to your point about not having a veteran wide receiver, I'm kind of glad they didn't do that. I would rather have these guys out there seeing what they have this year than have another situation like we had last year where someone like Travis Fulgham's losing snaps to a veteran who isn't going to be here the following year anyway. If they were going to get a veteran, who they could have for a couple years, that's something different. But yeah, I mean, these guys need to learn one way or the other, and Howie needs to see what he has in these guys and whether they're going to be part of the long-term plan. Because I feel like in the last couple of weeks, we all kind of forgot what this season is. It's a rebuilding year. It's a retooling year. We all kind of got swept up with the idea of the playoffs and forgot, what this team is. We were reminded today, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll take that point and kind of further it here with you guys, where I think a lot of the rebuilding, retooling, whatever the proper phrase is for this year, is recognizing that you don't have the talent to compete for a top-end playoff spot, anything beyond that. But at the same time, you're trying to figure out who you have in-house, right? You're trying to and it's not just the obvious, which is Jalen Hurts and the coaching staff. I think for the most part, it's moving on if you are with Jalen Hurts. And look, I don't know if anybody outside of DeVonta Smith I'm comfortable with having as an impact player at the wide receiver position moving forward. I mean, Quez Watkins, I think you can make an argument to hang. Yeah, you can make an argument for Quez to hang as like a number 4 guy here, but realistically, and maybe they find a better way to use him, and all the power we see Van Jefferson, there's a way to use a guy deep downfield that doesn't have to be a number 1 by all means. So I'll put Quez on that list too, but really Jalen Reagor, I mean, I don't know what we're getting anymore from this.
No, and he's not even really special teams. He's non-existent. He's not really bringing anything in the punt return game either. So, yeah, I just wonder, is it another case of, Howie forcing a guy? Again, he's 23. I mean, give him some time. Aguilar turned into a productive receiver after he had a couple really bad years early on. But yeah, it's not great right now.
Yeah. And, the other thing that I keep thinking is, and not, this isn't the order, but 2 against the Giants, 2 against Washington and the Jets. You really think this team's going to go 5-0? It's a rule of large numbers. I mean, this isn't a football team. I really don't think this is a 10 or 11 win football team. And obviously this was a game they should have won, but it's just, this is how it works out. You are what your record says you are. I think they're a 5-7 team. I think they could have 8 or 9 wins still, but I think to expect them to run the table and to win out is this team isn't talented or experienced enough for that.
No, I get it. So I wonder though, what this team, like what happened up in MetLife? Was it a team that just started to buy into all the hype around them, you think, Evan, where it was just the clippings, the talking, everything, the hype of a young team that still hasn't really dealt with any success outside of that stretch that they just had, where they just get caught slipping in the NFL, especially against a division opponent? Or do you think that because we've seen it, and this is why I asked, because we saw this at the start of the season, do you think that they slipped back into what could be their true identity, which is not what we saw over the last month and more a matter of panic and just uncertainty and just bad decisions, mistakes?
Oh, I think a couple things. I think the Falcons game to open the season had kind of a similar feel to it as the last couple, where they exceeded expectations and people said they're going to be good, they're going to be a playoff team, and then they stunk, right afterwards. So maybe there's some of that. I mean, it's a young, inexperienced team, and maybe they believed it. Maybe it was a trial and tribulation they needed to have in this Giants game. And the other point I think is that sample size is so small from one game. How many good teams did we see lose to awful teams, and then they were fine? I mean, we've seen that. It seems like a lot more in the NFL this year. Like almost every week, you have a Bills losing, you have the Bucks losing to teams not even on the playoff radar. If those guys can lose, and I don't watch every single snap of every single game, so I doubt that they were as ugly as this one. But, you're just going to lose sometimes in the NFL. You only play 16 games, and even the best teams have games like this. So I don't think I would panic until they do it against the Jets next week. Then I would panic.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of just saw, I think, Evan, you alluded to it there. This isn't a great team. They're going to have bad games against bad teams.
Sure.
They're just not that good to be consistently, at the top of their game every week. I think it was last week, Eytan, where you put at the end of the show, you kind of put a gun to our heads and we're like, are they going to make the playoffs or not? This game is kind of why I said no. They weren't going to keep playing at that level for the entire rest of the season.
Yep.
So I think there's some of it there. I think some of it is a division game. Those tend to go both ways. You never really know. And I also think, and this is probably the most concerning thing, is that there's starting to be more and more film out on Jalen Hurts and the Eagles offense, this version of the Eagles offense. Because they only changed a couple weeks ago. They haven't been doing this all season. So, there's only about a month of film of them being this run first team. And I think teams are going to start figuring out how to defend that. One of the Giants defenders said after the game, their game plan was make Jalen Hurts throw the ball. So, I mean, other teams are clearly starting to pick up on what the Eagles do well and figuring out how to stop them.
All right. So
can I just
let's
say
have
really
some fun. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
It's got to be really hard in the NFL not to make mistakes when everybody wants you to make mistakes. And the Eagles, the 3 interceptions, you had the Boston Scott fumble, you had those penalties by Nate Herbig. They killed themselves in this game. They were successful in is that they didn't shoot themselves in the foot. They cut down on the penalties. They didn't turn it over. So, I mean, the optimists would say that you just clean up some unforced errors and you win this game handily. So from that perspective, maybe things aren't as dire.
No, I totally agree. Totally agree. And I think to follow up on your point here, this happened after a stretch in which we saw 4 games. Now, granted, they didn't win all 4, but 3 of 4, they kept a similar identity. They even ran the ball again consistently against the Giants, but it was, granted, an extreme display of it with the 3 interceptions, the Boston Scott fumble. But still, it was back to what we saw early in the season where it was mistakes. It was self-inflicted wounds, unforced errors. Granted, again, today was an extreme of it, but that's what you hope is just, hey, you have a division game. Nothing changes long-term, right? I don't think that we look at this team, to Matt's point, any different by any means. So I can't imagine that either one of you will have, and we'll follow up with predictions, I'm sure, towards the end of the week on Philly Voice, but I can't imagine that either one of you have this thing within double digits, like single digits for the Jets to even compete, right? The Joe Flacco revenge game, Matt?
No, I mean, I'm not going to change my prediction based on, I think this was more of a one bad game for the Eagles. Not that I think they're going to run the table the rest of the way necessarily, but I think, they're going to bounce back this week. A loss like this typically puts a little fire under a team. The only thing you have to worry about is them looking to the bye the week after. But I think because of that, Sirianni is going to put an emphasis on like, we have to get this one now. And yeah, I think they come out fired up looking for some revenge next week. Hey, and they're playing in the same place, so they should know their way around this time.
All right, let's keep this short and sweet. The Eagles take on the Jets, and it's the Jets. Yes, they beat the Texans, but it's the Jets. There's no Joe Flacco revenge game, nothing like that. Zach Wilson goes down. He's hurt. Who knows what's going to happen with Carter and everything that the Jets are dealing with. No Corey Davis. That team is a disaster. They're not good. This is a definition of the teams that the Eagles beat up on before the Giants lost. You want to talk about playoffs. You want to talk about what they can do. You want to talk about having a great season, finishing 500, all these other things. Beat the Jets. That's it. It's as simple as that. Here's the good news. Teams that usually suffer losses like we just saw, that are decent to good, and I think the Eagles fall in that category, have a knack for bouncing back, especially taking on a punching bag like the New York Jets. All of the problems, all of the issues, everything that we went over, all of the problems that you have dealt with and talked about with your friends, your family, work, wherever, those aren't going away unless you beat the Jets. And the beauty of it is you have a chance right now to iron out some major wrinkles because it's the Jets. Go out there, same stadium, same environment. You're not going to see many fans there because it's the Jets. And go kick the snot out of them. And then all of a sudden, everything erased. That Giants loss erased. And we're talking about back to this reality that we're used to over the last month where the Eagles are competing and winning football games and beating up on miserable teams like they should have against the Giants. Good news, it's the Jets.